Hello, I'm Ken Graham, your Superintendent of Schools, and I want to thank you for taking the time to learn more about our Board of Education's proposal for full-day kindergarten and enrollment management. We're very excited about what this plan means for supporting our students for the next few decades, and I'd like to begin by explaining why we have to do this. Over the past 15 years, our district's Instructional Space Committee has been monitoring enrollment growth and trends at all of our elementary schools. And they've been doing that at the board's request to make sure that we have enough space to support our small class size initiative. This group that's made up of parent representatives from each of our schools, school and district administrators, teachers, and community representatives at large have made a number of recommendations for protecting our small class size work. First, they've recommended that locker rooms that were going unused at our elementary schools be converted into usable classroom space, which has been done. They also recognize that enrollment growth at Leary Elementary far exceeded enrollment growth at our other schools and recommended we put an addition onto that school to accommodate it, which we did. They've also made recommendations to place our self-contained special education classes at schools that have the appropriate room. And also, they have been making recommendations for small attendance area changes that would accommodate the enrollment growth that was being experienced across the district to ensure that our students were going to schools where we could continue to keep our class size initiatives in place. We've been very pleased with the work of our Instructional Space Committee over these past 15 years because they've been able to make recommendations that have avoided the need for any major redistricting. Unfortunately, 3 years ago, the Instructional Space Committee came to the board and reported that we couldn't patch this any longer, that as we look at our enrollment projections for the next decade, enrollment in our elementary schools is going to be going up. But it's not going to be going up evenly. It's going to be going up more at some schools than others. And particularly, it's going to be going up at some of our larger schools if we don't do something about it. Now, the problem is that right now that Leary Elementary is our largest elementary school. We have roughly 550 students at that school. Our enrollment projections are saying that we're going to be adding another 100 students to that school over the next few years. Okay, that would mean adding additional classroom space to the point that when it would be done, Leary's students would require 13 classrooms more than are being required at our smaller school, which is right now Crane, which supports about 420 students. The simple fact is that Crane and other schools, such as File, have classroom space that's going unused. And it's extremely hard to justify adding any more space to our larger schools when we have other schools in our district with space that's unused. It just can't be economically justified. In addition, what we've been learning over the past few years is that our students' access to a variety of educational support services within our schools is made different, is made less equitable when schools take on different sizes. Think about speech and language therapies. Think about reading support. Think about the use of a library media's time, a school nurse teacher's time, a social worker's time. The simple fact is when your school is 400, those students have better access to those school-based services than when a school has 600. Now, of course, you could say, well, there's a simple solution. Take some of the resources away from the smaller schools and send it to the bigger schools, which we could do. But then you get into partial staffing assignments that really interfere with the quality of the services being provided. It's much better to have full-time staff members at schools to provide those services. So we get right back to the base problem. To serve the needs of the larger school, we would have to add staffing that can't be justified given that those staffing capabilities are being underutilized or less utilized at different schools. So the board concluded that moving forward, the biggest problem we had was, in the long term, is looking at enrollment growth, making sure that we had enough space to meet our small class size initiative, but to do it in a way that also created schools of similar size. And that was the proposal that the direction they gave to our Instructional Space Committee. In addition, they felt that since we were going to deal with attendance areas and we were going to have to engage in some school construction at our elementary schools, this would be the best time to deal with a second problem, which was providing full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergarten is now provided in in all but 20 school districts in New York State. There are roughly 730 of those school districts. Okay, we have not been able to add it because of our commitment to small class sizes. If we wanted to let our class sizes grow, we could create the classroom space for the full-day kindergarten. But our board knows that parents and teachers both very highly value the benefits that small class sizes provide to our children. So it's not a question of one or the other. We have to have both. So this is an opportunity, since we're going to have to go through an attendance reconfiguration. It's an opportunity to add on the space that's needed for the full-day kindergarten program, and that's what is being proposed by the board. Now, before I go any further in explaining the board's proposal for school reconfiguration, please know that the board and I are very proud of our schools, and we're very pleased with the current configuration. It does a great job of supporting our kids and their academic growth. We're not dealing with a reconfiguration because we are concerned about the effectiveness of the current school structure. It's a good structure. What we're asking is there a better structure? A structure that does the same things of the current configuration, but also addresses some of the issues and concerns people have drawn to our attention over these past 20 years that could even make a good structure better. The Space Committee has been asked 3 years ago to come up with some different ideas, some different approaches that could be used, not just to balance the enrollment among our elementary schools by changing attendance areas, but also to do it in a way that would allow us to add full-day kindergarten program. And the Space Committee came back 2 years ago with 8 different ideas. And for the past 2 years, the Board of Education has been carefully analyzing each of the different approaches, and in addition, they've come up with 4 more on their own. They've looked at the pros and cons, and out of those 12 approaches, they've identified 2 that they consider to be the most feasible ways of moving forward. We've been referring to them for the past 6 months as Alternative 1 and Alternative 2. Alternative 1 maintains the status quo. It basically says, let's keep our K-5 school configuration, let's make the modifications that we need to make to our attendance areas, and then add on the physical space we need to provide for enrollment stability and for full-day kindergarten. When we costed it out, we felt that it would take about $20 million to do that. The board, when they saw the price tag, said, okay, that's a feasible alternative, but if we're going to spend $20 million, you know, there are a lot of issues that people had brought up over the past 20 years with our current school configuration. Is there anything we could do that would not just provide balancing school size and full-day kindergarten, but also address some of those other problems? And it was that line of thinking that led the board to conclude that there was a better alternative, and that's the second alternative, Alternative 2, which is the K3, 4, 6, 7, 9 configuration. This is the configuration that the board feels will best meet the needs of our students over the next few decades, and it's the one that I'm going to explain to you now. The board's proposal is to establish symmetrical feeder patterns for our school that will remain stable for many years into our future. And basically what it calls for are 4 equally sized primary schools. These are schools that cover the grade levels kindergarten through 3rd grade. 2 primary schools feeding an intermediate school that will represent a configuration of grades 4 through 6. 2 of those. And then the 2 intermediate schools feeding a 7-9 secondary school, which will then come together at the high school 10-12. This is what we call the K3, 4, 6, 7, 9 configuration. When looking at which schools would best serve those purposes, the feeling was for future enrollment managed purposes and the stability of enrollment boundaries, we should use the schools on the outside perimeter of our district as our K3 schools, and those would be Leary, File, Crane, and Winslow. So the proposal is to make those 4 schools K3 schools. File and Leary would feed Vollmer. The plan is to open Vollmer, reopen it as a 4-6 school. And the reason for that is because of its physical proximity to not just Leary and File, but also to Berger, which would be the 7-9 school. In fact, create a campus school for 4, 6, 7, 9 on the west side of town to better serve the needs of that community. Crane and Winslow will be the K-3 primary schools that feed Sherman, which will be the 4-6 school. Sherman was selected as the 4-6 school for two reasons. First, it has the closest proximity to Roth. Second, and perhaps more important, Sherman and Vollmer have exactly the same floor plan. So the two schools physically will be identical, thereby supporting and encouraging, promoting an equity, not just of physical space, but of the educational services that are available to our children at both locations. Rothenberger will continue to serve 7th and 8th grade, but they'll also be serving 9th grade. The 9th grade academy building, the Carlton Webster building, would no longer be used as an active school, but what we would do is move all of the functions and services that are being performed at the Vollmer Learning Center to the 9th grade academy. So in the end, we started with 9 schools and we end with 9 schools. And that was important because it doesn't add any money to the operating cost of the reconfiguration. It provides the additional space, but it doesn't increase the day-to-day operating expenses of what we're doing. So as you think about this configuration, which I know is difficult because it's so different than what we're doing today, what we ask you to do is to really think about and reflect on the highlights. And the highlights are these. First, we're providing sufficient room for full-day kindergarten. Second, we're creating schools of similar size, which is going to provide a better equity of access of our students to the support services, the educational services that our children need to be successful. Third, our plan provides 3 classrooms at each elementary school that are being set aside for instructional support services. Services like reading support, services like ESL, services like space for our literacy coaches and math coaches to meet with teachers and provide academic intervention support to students. Right now at our larger schools, these services have to be crowded into the library or into nooks and crannies that exist within the school, which simply aren't proper instructional spaces for our students with great needs. Our plan provides that additional space and locks it in. We've also built the plan so that there will be 2 additional classrooms at each school that right now, for at least the next 5 years, aren't going to be needed to accommodate enrollment projections. And the reason for that is recognizing we're starting to go back into a growth trend at our elementary schools. We want to make sure that we have room to assume additional growth without having to go back and think about changing attendance areas again. So it's what we call stabilizing the attendance areas. These are all features of the plan that the board is proposing to you. The board has also used this base plan to start to think about other problems that people have raised over the years, and much of that has to do with the start and end times of schools. As you look at the plan, you'll see that because we're reconfiguring, it's allowing us to look at doing our transportation system differently. And it begins with the high school. Our high school for years has asked us to see if we could start our school later. High school students work at night, they stay up studying late at night, and to bring them in for 7:30 start time, very often bus pickups at 6:30 in the morning, is very difficult to maximize their engagement in school. The research that we've been looking at recently about high school success supports that. But simply we haven't been able to do it because the school configuration and the busing system simply could never be organized in a way that would make it possible. This reconfiguration allows this to happen, and our proposal is to start our high school day at 8:15 as opposed to 7:30. And at the 7-9 secondary schools, we will start those schools at 7:30, which accomplishes another purpose or solves another problem. It has to do with our 7th and 8th graders who are participating in high school activities and modified sports, many times being asked to leave classrooms during the regular school day early so that they could get to their sporting events or to their rehearsal events on a timely basis. By starting our 7-9 program earlier, it ends earlier, which means that our modified A and B teams will be able to get to their events at times that allow them to finish their activities while it's still daylight. And it also makes sure that they get to the high school for those that are playing up on JV and varsity sports or participating in after-school high school activities. It gives them the opportunity to arrive at the high school before those activities begin. And we see that as a tremendous benefit that we've been unable to address. At At the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, one of our biggest issues has been providing additional time for instruction in the areas of English language arts and mathematics, particularly at 5th grade. And the problem's been that because we just don't have enough time during the school day, that we've had to run not just our music lessons, but also our ensemble practices, our band, our orchestra, our chorus. They've had to be run during the day, and what that means is taking out large blocks of kids from their instructional classrooms, interrupting the flow of their English language arts and math instruction. And our school administrators have been asking for years about providing some additional time onto the school day so those ensemble activities could be moved to a time where they wouldn't interrupt instruction. We haven't been able to do that because with 5 schools currently supporting 5th grades, it would simply be too expensive to run a transportation system with a late bus that would make that possible. But with the reconfiguration, there are only 2 schools with 5th grade grade level responsibilities, and we can provide a late bus that accommodates that longer school day. And the longer school day creates the opportunity not just for more time for the ensemble practices, but we're also anticipating that we're going to be offering a wide set of student clubs and activities after school to our 4th and 5th graders, similar to what our 6th graders can enjoy today in the more traditional middle school setting. One additional feature of the plan is not really related to the school configuration itself, but it relates more to the board's thinking about the challenges that we're going to be facing as a district in the near future. And one of those is the ability of our families to provide adequate access to child care services, schools-age child care services. And we believe that we have arranged the primary school structure. The K-3 schools have been set up or will be set up under this proposal to accommodate the provision of wraparound child care services at all 4 schools. We're hoping that through a partnership with the town of Henrietta that we're going to be able to open our schools with child care services by 6:30 in the morning, knowing that the class doesn't start till 9. And then at the end of the day, for parents that need that additional daycare support, our hope is that we'll be able to provide that at the school until roughly 6:30 in the evening. It's a safe environment for the kids. The lunch program, the breakfast program will be available to those that want to take advantage of it. But the most important thing, it accommodates the stresses placed on many of our families in finding daycare that will support their child's educational success. We're very excited about that possibility, and we believe that that's an important feature that's possible by this organization, by this way of configuring schools. You know, these are just a few of the benefits that the Board of Education sees associated with moving to a K-3, 4, 6, 7, 9 configuration. There's also going to be some problems, problems that we believe mostly have to do with transitioning, the actual steps we have to take to make sure that our students and families are supported as we move from our current organizational configuration to the one that's being proposed. And the board recognizes that there's a lot of work that's going to need to be done to understand what those needs are and how we have to support it. But their belief is that once the transition is complete and people have moved away from the status quo to this new configuration, they'll view it as being more powerful and more supportive than what we have today. And that's what we're going to be asked to vote on February 10th. On February 10th, you'll be asked to vote on 2 propositions. The first proposition will authorize the Board of Education to expend up to $19 million to do the construction that's necessary to implement this school configuration for balancing school sizes and for providing full-day kindergarten. The second proposition will allow them to set up a reserve fund, a savings account, to collect the funding that is going to be needed to expend the $19 million. The good news is that the money for this project has already been saved. It exists in a number of different savings accounts, or what we call reserve funds. So it's simply a matter of transferring that money into an account that the State Education Department allows us to use for construction projects. And the second proposition is simply the approval to do that. What this means is that we can undertake this school reconfiguration project and provide the full-day kindergarten support without any increase on the tax rate. There'll be no increase in the need to raise additional money for this purpose. And we're very excited about that as well. Now, a question I've been asked is, what happens if this proposition isn't supported by the community on February 10th? Does that mean there'll be no full-day kindergarten? The board has already taken a very firm stance that that's not the case. Full-day kindergarten and enrollment management have to be addressed. In fact, a recent study by the Instructional Space Committee has told us that we can squeeze by till the year 2019, and then we are absolutely out of space, regardless of any type of reconfiguration we could do for enrollment growth, without even considering the full-day kindergarten program. So what the board has said is, if this community doesn't agree with them that this is the best way to move forward, that we'll go back and take a look at alternative one, which is to keep the status quo. But please know that the status quo, which means keeping the current K-5 organization, is not going to allow us to address the kinds of problems such as the need for extended time at the fifth grade, the bus scheduling issues, the possibility of adding universal pre-K. These are all going to be problematic for us. Even the wraparound daycare, which when you add a fifth school, it just becomes difficult because you're spreading the demand for the service so thin, it becomes economically difficult to offer the service. These are the kinds of issues that will probably have to be set aside as we move forward with that first alternative. Again, every alternative has its pros and its cons. Also, I want to be very clear that alternative one does require significant attendance area changes. That's going to be inevitable under either alternative. And we are going to need to make some staffing adjustments. As enrollments change at different schools, staff are going to have to be moved to different schools, which creates some additional angst. And of course, we'll still have the transition problems that people will be concerned about with either alternative regarding, how it affects my child the year they have to move from one location to another. We understand that anxiety. We understand those concerns. But they represent transition issues that we think we can manage with the 2.5 years we have to plan this together. So I just ask you to reflect on not the transition problems, the short-term aspects of this, but rather kind of step back and think about, what do you think is the best configuration for supporting your child's education as we move forward into the 21st century? Now, at some of our parent meetings, we've been asked, why aren't we voting on both alternative one and alternative two so we can have a choice? And there's a very clear reason for that. The board has spent over a year carefully looking at the pros and cons of these two alternatives, and they have unanimously agreed that alternative two, the K3, 4, 6, 7, 9 configuration, offers more for the money. They really do believe that this is a better way for moving forward. So what you're going to be asked to do is to show your agreement by voting yes for the propositions or lack of agreement in their work. If the proposal is defeated, the board will read that as a message to return to alternative one. And as I said earlier, the board is comfortable with the current school organization. We can build from the status quo and move forward. The simple fact is the board feels that their alternative is better, and we hope that you look at it from that perspective. So just to close up, February 10th, we're going to be asking you to vote on this proposition. And I appreciate you taking the time today to learn more about it. If there is more information that you would like to receive about this particular initiative, please go to the district website. And there is a hot button, a hot link on the district website you can click on, which has many different forms of information about different alternatives that have been investigated, more of the advantages that are associated with the proposed reconfiguration. Also, which I think you'll find very interesting and helpful, is a blog on frequently asked questions. As we move through our parent presentations and staff presentations on the board's proposal, questions get asked that we think may be of interest to more than the person who's asked it. So we go to the district website, post the question, and then do our best to provide the answer. And many of the kinds of transition questions that you may be concerned about are posted. The responses are posted in that particular area. We're also conducting a series of parent and community meetings during December and January, and the schedule of those meetings appears on the district website. We'd love to have you come out and engage in a dialogue with us and the board regarding what the pros and cons are of this alternative and how we should move it forward. Please recognize that even though we're running those forums at different schools, you're free to attend any school or any of the forums that matches your schedules. We just want to make sure that the board has an opportunity to be accessible to the parents at each of the schools that make up our school community. So with that, again, thank you for taking the time to learn more about the Board of Education's proposal for full-day kindergarten and enrollment management, knowing that this is an inevitable problem that's been building for over 15 years, one that's been studied in great detail by the board for the past 3 years. What the board is asking you to consider is the alternative that they believe, based on their work, is the best configuration for our students as we move our district forward for the next decades. We're looking forward to what you think. Thank you.